Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for a webinar organized by Citizen Matters Chennai on the state of women's safety and how Chennai can be made safer for women across the board and what we can do about this issue. So I'm Aruna Natarajan. I'm the Associate Editor of Citizen Matters Chennai. So before we begin, I'd just like to mention the work that we do and how this sort of ties into our larger goals as well. So Citizen Matters is a civic media platform, and we serve as a knowledge exchange platform where we carry reports on critical urban issues, delve into ideas and solutions for cities, look at issues that affect quality of life, including water, commute, public safety, air quality, governance, education, environment, and economy, among other things. And one of the things that we are looking to do more and more is to look at solutions-focused journalism and trying to understand the problems that are faced by a wide cross-section of people who experience life in our cities, hearing from them, platforming their voices, and trying to figure out how we can solve problems that we all collectively face together is one of our main sort of goals for organizing these events and the work that we do as well. So this is sort of what informs what we do. And so today we put together a panel to look at how we can make Chennai safer for women. What is the work that's happening around this issue on the ground? What are the voices on the ground? And what have been your experiences, even in your personal capacity as a woman navigating the city? What are the challenges that we've all faced, and how this is something that we can work together and address? So with us, we have two members from the Gender and Policy Lab of the Greater Chennai Corporation, Vaishnavi, who's the policy expert, and Steffi, who's the communications specialist. Thank you so much for joining us today. We also have Jyoti Lakshmi Sundaresan, who's an advocate with the Madras High Court, and she's passionate about women's rights, and we'll also be touching upon all the legal aspects of the fights that women have to sort of face. We also have Pavitra, who's an urban planner and an architect, who can perhaps talk to us about how we can plan for a city that is inclusive and how we can factor in the considerations of women. We have Pritika, who's a director of FICUS, who's an environmental activist of sorts, and she's also a regular user of public transport in the city, and she's out and about and organizing and speaking with a wide variety of people. So we'd like to bring in her perspective on how life in the city is for women as such. So this is so the format would be that I think I'd be posing each of you perhaps a question on what are the issues that are faced by women, and then we can take it from there. It's a freewheeling informal discussion, so please don't feel conscious or anything. So we can just get started. So I think I'd like to bring in both Steffi and Vaishnavi, perhaps to set the stage and talk about the gender lab as such. So why did the idea for the gender lab come up? What about Chennai sort of inspired the idea that there has to be a gender lab in the city?
I'll take that question, Aruna. Thank you so much for having us here today. So the Gender and Policy Lab, we are an entity within the Greater Chennai Corporation. How did we come into the picture? We are a component of the Chennai City Partnership, which is basically a project, a collaboration between the government of Tamil Nadu and the World Bank. Way back in 2021, a team of technical experts basically had conducted a gap assessment. They sort of did a study of the current systems and processes in Chennai to understand what are the current systems and what are the current processes and how do they affect women's safety in public spaces and transportation. And there was a need for a body like a Gender and Policy Lab to sort of tie up all these different departments that work in silos. And that's how we came into the picture. There was definite recognition that we need to think about activities, studies, and different measures to sort of leverage different institutional partnership and look at safety of marginalized users with respect to public space and public transportation. So the Greater Chennai Corporation basically took the ownership of having us within the body. we are funded completely by the Nirbhaya funds. So any study, any sort of activity, campaign, collaboration that we do, all of this, it's funded by the Nirbhaya funds. And what is our objective? Our objective is to improve the access and safety of women and girls and other marginalized users in the city with respect to public spaces and transportation. So, I mean, initially when we are set up within the Greater Chennai Corporation, and year one, we were looking at bringing in gender inclusivity to all of corporations' work. But in the long run, and we have already started doing this, in fact, we are closely working with other stakeholder departments such as the MTC, the social welfare, Kumta, CMDA, the Greater Chennai Police. And for the next 3 years, we're going to closely work with all of these departments whose activities are also closely linked with the safety of women in public spaces. Aruna, you're muted.
Thank you so much for giving us an overview of what the Gender Lab does. So I'd like to bring in Pritika now to just talk about her experience in sort of using public transport in the city and going about, because I think recently there was this piece of news that Chennai is one of the safer metros. So once that sort of went online, you could hear a slew of voices of women on social media, simply talking about just how unsafe experience in the city has been. And there was such a contrast to the news that the news item was there. So there was like an outpouring of these anecdotes and stuff. So one of the reasons we wanted to bring that panel together was it felt like there was a dissonance between like something that the study was claiming about ease of living and safety and what people were experiencing on the ground. And this is only a very small sliver of the voices that you could hear and see on social media. So I just wanted to bring in Pritika to talk about like your experiences of navigating the city, not just using public transport, perhaps even taking up public spaces, and what have your challenges been in that regard?
Thanks for this question. I think basically I still feel quite unsafe, or like public spaces don't belong to me. It's usually like, you spend as little time as possible. You plan your trips so that you know what time you're reaching where. You let people know where you are. And I think I'm a regular bus user, and I travel from Royapeta to Ayanavaram regularly. And some of the work that I do is to go to 3 different Chennai corporation schools which don't have a very accessible bus stop. So one thing across the board that has made me feel quite unsafe is the rush that comes into a bus, right? So when I enter a bus, my dignity and my sense of space is immediately taken away. I have to sort of give up on this assumption that I can regulate the space around me, because we are crushed in. And the space is also like, see, if you're going to use a bus, of course, that's how it's going to be. It's a sort of attitude that, of course, this is how it's going to be. You have to adjust. But then I also feel like I'm only putting myself in a lot of, it's like I'm creating an opportunity for groping to happen. But sometimes that's not, I mean, of course, it's not in my hand. So I don't know about the study that said, oh, women feel safer in general. How can we feel safer when currently it's like the men in the bus, it depends on them. Are they going to do something for you or not? And the only thing that we can do after it is how we respond to it. And more often than not, the response is to feel immense shame and self-censoring and silencing when anything does happen. And just want to add another point. So in the organization, I work with another employee. She travels from Guruvangeri and comes. So it's like taking 2 trains and 2 buses and coming. And each time, we are quite, we feel quite responsible. We make sure that she leaves home earlier. Maybe she doesn't come for an afternoon session of work because she has to go home and she has to use public transport. So she we cannot afford private transport in this situation. So there is a sense of discomfort. There is a sense of a lack of safety, because it's like we honestly cannot trust fellow male public transport users. And if something would happen, who do we go to? And before even going to someone, it's like we only have that immediate stigma and shame of silencing ourselves. So on a personal level and on an organization level, navigating the city, I'm constantly aware that at any minute something can happen. And so I spend as little time as possible. I do not feel like this bus is mine, or I do not feel a sense of agency when I take a bus. It's like if something didn't happen today, I was lucky. You're on mute.
All of us on some level can relate to what your experiences have been. Unfortunately, I think it's one of those situations. So I want to bring in Pavitra to talk about perhaps how like the city planning has contributed to this, or how our public spaces are that add to the factor of making these spaces unsafe. Is there anything that's inherently like an issue with how our cities are that sort of isolate women or make them feel unsafe in any way? Your take on this?
So, well, I mean, to begin with, I'd say that there are two aspects of it itself. Like, one is like a societal understanding of what women are and their sort of claim to public space. Now, that is something over and beyond what built infrastructure can do. But that being apart, what the government can do per se would be the built infrastructure. Now, that built infrastructure is about whether there is infrastructure for women, as what Pritika was talking about, more bus fleet, or like so that there is less crowd on the buses, whether there are toilets on the road, whether there is infrastructure, there is like lighting where it is well lit that you don't feel unsafe on that road. Now, even that, there is an aspect of perceptional safety. That perceptional safety changes from person to person. You may be somebody who may have just come from Bombay, and you're very used to walking at 11 in the night, and you're completely okay with it, and you take a stroll on the road at 11, and that may be completely okay. But being in Chennai, there may be a lot of people who may think that you just can't at all walk on the road at 11 o'clock because of all the varied things that can happen to you. So to break that perceptional safety, the built infrastructure comes into place. Now, the built infrastructure like lighting, like public spaces which are more open, which are less secluded, which are like have more eyes on the street, right? Like, so there is this concept by Jane Jacobs who says that the maximum number of eyes on the street really help in how safe a public space can be. With regards to built infrastructure, I mean, infrastructure in the sense lighting is the last component that can be incorporated maybe, but the first step when they are building the master plan itself, for example, if they have a rule saying that commercial establishments have to have that much transparency to have sort of lighting on the road or visual viewing of somebody who's inside the private sort of place to what the public space is, and you create more eyes on the street, that's what will help in perceptional safety. That is something that can be introduced by the government, not maybe the societal sort of understanding, and one will feed on to the other eventually. But we need it's like a chicken and egg situation, but you need to start somewhere, and you can only start by building with what you have in your hand.
So I think, yeah, that's a very fair assessment in that, like how the whole the role that society plays also feeds into it. So you can't look at one aspect and in isolation and hope that that would really fix the whole problem. And here I'd like to bring in Jyoti Lakshmi ma'am to talk about like what are the sort of avenues available for women to sort of seek recourse in case they have faced any issues in public. Like this also brings in that factor of being confident and being out and about. If you think that if there is an issue you face, you could sort of find some kind of redressal. So what is available to women who face this kind of harassment in public spaces? How do you see these checks and balances like playing out on the ground? Are they effective? Do women feel empowered enough to even like come forward and talk about the issues that they face, or is it something that people just sort of suffer in silence?
Yeah, no, first of all, thank you for Citizen Matters for organizing this panel exclusively with all women panel, which is rare even in 2023. How safe we all feel. Like when we were kids, we were told by the parents like to get educated properly, to find a good job, be financially and emotionally independent so that you can have freedom and liberation and you can decide whatever you want. But in 2023, after having everything, we still feel unsafe. That is where we need to address. And why we feel, unsafe. So from judiciary part, we have all the laws in place. Like if you take a woman, we live in 3 spaces, right? At home and at public places and at workspace. If something happens to you in the home, you have the Domestic Violence Protection Act, so you have the protection officers to approach. You have a protection officer at every district, and you have a shelter homes. You have people to help you on the legal aid and medical aid. They're all the registered service providers. So something happens to you at home, you can avail these avenues. And at workplace, you have a sexual harassment, Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act, and you are mandatory to have the ICC committees. Like if something happens to you at the workplace and you are abused, you have to go to the ICC, and it is a time-bound machinery and procedures that has been prescribed, right? But at the public place, so TN has this unique place. We have something called Tamil Nadu Prevention of Harassment of Women. That came in about 1998. That was as a response to the Sarika Shah issue that had happened during that time and other Eve teasing cases. So this is a very effective mechanism, and this is only one kind of act in whole of India that Tamil Nadu have. So as a state, as a society, we are concerned about women safety. We prioritize that. We have helplines and machineries in place. But how functional that is, how women feel, trust on those police agencies, or how much trust they have on the courts or on the advocates, that has to be measured. You have cases like Bilkis Banu, right? After seeing what had happened to the whole episode, so you rely more on the political power than on the judicial power. So there are so many power equations that play on the space. So despite all those things, how we can gain the trust of women to approach the legal mechanism is a challenge that we face now. And the other lapses we find is it is not time bound, even though the law prescribes like it has to be time bound, and even cases like POCSO has to be completed within 1 year. It is not happening on the ground. So we have challenges while making these mechanisms and avenues functional.
So functionality is the key, sort of operationalizing all the laws that we have, yes, and the machinery that is in place is a key challenge.
And we have a very poor conviction rate also, right? So when a woman lodge a complaint and she goes through the trial, what happens after that is equal trauma to the victim. So that we need to address this.
So I'd like to bring in both Steffi and Vaishnavi, or Vaishnavi, perhaps if you can take this question. So some of the work of the Gender Lab we've seen is about studying public spaces, and so how do you also address this societal attitudes towards women, and is that something that you look at when you interact with the other stakeholder departments, and is there something being done around that as well?
Right. Thank you. So like whatever other panelists said, it's very relatable in personal level, and also those points were important. So in terms of what as a Gender Lab we have been placed to do is mainly work within the institutions. Although we do, like Pavitra, she was saying that there are societal components and then there are design aspects of it. And I feel we are placed in a place where we can push it for a lot of institutional level change along with societal change. So we do both. But the first year we have been working more on the institutional aspects of it. Say, for example, there are certain frameworks that exist, what would make a city inclusive for women. But how do you adapt it to Chennai context? And how do you adapt it in a way that it trickles down to the lowest level, right? Those are the kind of things that need to happen. These framework exists, these policies exist, these best practices exist. But how do you translate that to in your ward? How do you translate that into your zone? And how do you do it in a way that the zonal engineer or like zonal person there knows that these are the kind of checklists that they have to do in order to make it inclusive for everybody. So these are the kind of aspect that we work around with. And also, Chennai as a city is already like grown. So we are working around in that context. Within this context, now like what are the pieces that you could move to make it much more livable and safer, safer for women and other genders as well. So we are working within that context. So to give you an example, like say new bus stops are going to come. So what are the new things that women are expecting in a bus stop? So what are the things that are making them, making them feel unsafe whilst waiting in a bus stop? So what are the components that can be added in the new bus stops that are coming up that would make them safe? Same way for like we are working around with the existing parks. So what are the things? Like you can't like completely change the entire park because that park has existed there for like 50, 60 years. So we do look at like this eyes on the street, visibility, openness, all of those concepts, but also like work around like this act as a facilitating body between women and these institutions, asking like what more would you need in order to come for a park? What would be the do you need like special hours that needs like that parks need to be open exclusively for you, or do you need special equipment, or like do you want the security to be more sensitive to your needs? So what are the things that need to be done that we can work backwards and fix it within the system? So these are the kind of things that we do. When it comes to societal aspects, we do have like a couple of campaigns that we did last year. Like we worked with MTC on one particular campaign where we said speak up, speak out, where we encouraged citizens not to keep quiet when you are being harassed within the MTC bus stop. So it was like a clear campaign about like 4-step process. What are things that you could do if you are like being harassed within the MTC bus stop, sorry, MTC buses. And MTC has also come up with a panic button initiative where you press the panic button if something happens inside the bus stop. So that was also one of the steps which was part of a campaign as a reaction where we encouraged women, and not only women, but men as bystanders to react for such instances as well. So yeah, these are the like, overall, some of the few things that we do within Gender Lab.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think one of the key pieces is also that how do we bring men into the fold and also get sort of a response or an understanding of where they figure in this problem that women face, and then like elicit some kind of awareness among them as well. So with regard to that, I think the next part, I think maybe we can just a little forward-looking sort of focus over here. So if I could bring in Pritika to maybe talk about what are the things that she wishes for in like an ideal city. So Chennai, where for her, like the immediate sort of things that are actionable, some of the things that you wish Chennai had that would make you feel safer, would make Chennai feel safer and more welcoming for women and gender minorities.
I really like all the points shared, and I think one of the first things what even Pavitra and Vaishnavi spoke about, right, is bringing more eyes into the picture. Like I would also feel safe, for example, if I'm going to a park, and we know that there are people who are there who are actively sort of playing the role of a security personnel, and it'd be even better if it were women who were playing the role of security personnel. Maybe in buses, if there were more conductors who were women, the bus drivers are women, that would be excellent. And I feel, I've been thinking about this question since I was invited to this panel. What would I like? What would I see to make it safer for myself? And this is a point that I'm bringing that I've sort of read elsewhere and which I related to, is that when we bring a sort of disability-centric focus into our infrastructure or into our public spaces, then it sort of includes everyone as well. Like example, by disability, I mean not just physical disability, but in terms of also how mentally you are reacting to the spaces around you. So if I were to take the MTC bus, there are 2 seats in front for someone who comes in with crutches. But if we could make the entire bus such that people are seated during a bus ride, there is absolutely no need for anyone to be standing and to be crushed against each other. We will all be having our seats. We would all have a dignity of space. And that is in terms of a physical disability. In terms of mental disability as well, I know a couple of people who are afraid to get into that closed space because skin to skin just feels extremely threatening, right? So it's like they can't afford private transport, but they have to take public, and they sort of stranded, the sort of paralysis that happens. So again, here, if we were take a disability perspective into, okay, creating that little seat of space, that if I pay for a ticket on a bus, I am guaranteed that I have this seat. And maybe increasing frequency of buses would definitely be helpful. Just I feel in general, if we could take the minority view and make it the majority view in how we view our spaces, there is an immediate across the board inclusivity that comes. It's like if I were a trans woman and I entered public spaces, I know that immediately I would sort of be looked at differently. But if trans women were the ones who are coming and who are sort of taking ownership of that space, or taking agency of that space, I as a cis woman would feel safe than to see more men in that space, is what I would say. I would feel more like, okay, this space is also for me. So I feel like a minority centric approach, which pushes it to the majority, is not, we're not constantly just thinking, okay, marginalized are here and there. They're everywhere. I mean, we are all everywhere. So to center that in our approach towards urban infrastructure, and I think social attitudes as well. It's really nice to hear there was a campaign about speaking up at an MTC bus if anything happens to you. So if more of that happens and more of us learn about, because I feel I might have attended a campaign maybe 10 years ago, but we regularly need to keep hearing it, that it's okay for us to speak up. We regularly need to know that there's no shame in doing it. And like how Ma'am Jyoti Lakshmi Ma'am had said as well, that Tamil Nadu government has these cells that we can make use of. And maybe if we have like an in-betweener person who can, sort of work to liaison between public and existing departments, that'd be fantastic. And I think at the end of the day, having more lights definitely helps. I honestly believe that there are still so many streets that I visit which don't have lights. My own street doesn't have a proper street lamp. And thankfully, because of our phones right now, we have a sense of, okay, we have a flashlight in our hands. So that has helped. But I really like the suggestions. And I think going forward, seeing more women, seeing more of the differently able come into the center space and make policy decisions would be, I would feel safer, is what I would say.
Thank you. I think there were a lot of interesting things that you spoke about, and also about the constant trade-offs that we have, as women have to make between like safety and even our productivity, or in terms of monetary decisions that we make. It's always something that we end up having to factor into our everyday life. So I'd perhaps like to bring in Pavitra to talk about like your wish list for Chennai, on how Chennai can be improved, and also if there are any other examples or efforts in other cities similar to the ones that you've spoken about, like putting more eyes on the ground or any kind of planning that Chennai can take a leaf out of, because now the third master plan exercise is underway. So how can such perspectives be integrated at the planning stage itself, when you're sort of envisioning how the city should be in the future?
You're on mute.
Sorry, yes. So I was saying that when we, just like what Kritika was saying, if we start conglomerating the aspects of what vulnerable people want, right? It's often said you design for kids, then it's safe for women, it's safe for people who have accessibility issues, anything. So similarly, if you design for women, it is applicable that it is a safe city for everybody. And therefore, to start with, I don't think there is a particular city across the world which can claim themselves to be completely safe for women, for just like the societal aspects of how terrible humans we are. But that apart, as infrastructure itself, I think it is more of a holistic development that can happen with regards to how public spaces are designed, with regards to how policy level changes are incorporated within our master plan, with our building roads, with how our private spaces interact with our public spaces, with how just how maybe even our streets are designed. Our streets are designed so keeping the pedestrian as the last sight, like when in any street where across Chennai now, where you're seeing so much of metro work that is happening, we are sure to definitely see that there is an alternative routing that is done for vehicles, but there is never an alternative route or a pathway that is separated out for pedestrians, right? So I'm saying safety begins there. Safety begins with the idea, I mean, across the board. I'm sure whoever has spoken to any GCC member, anybody at CMDA, anybody at Kumta, nobody is ever going to say that you don't want safety for women. Nobody is ever going to stand at that and say that at all. But I think it's just like that, like, the very thing that you don't think that it's necessary. Like, it's like, you ask anybody, nobody will say that there are that many pedestrians on the ground. Last weekend, we were there at Trivandrum doing some pedestrian and vehicle counts. You should see the number of cyclists on the street, there are a number of pedestrians on the street. These people are just the people you don't get to see. And even more so worse when they're women and, sort of at odd hours when they're out. Why do we even call it odd hours, right? Like, there is no odd hour. Like, you should be able to go out at any hour, and it should be completely normalized in that sense. But I mean, now that you're seeing like a city where I have been outside, I have been in cities, like I've walked in Ahmedabad at say 11:30, 12 in the night, and I've been completely okay. Like, I've never felt a sense of fear. Or I've been in Bombay, I've been in New York, but when I went to Trivandrum recently for a project, the roads are so tiny and there is no street light. That automatically puts you off. There is a sense of confidence you come with because you've been in different places. You can handle it. But I'm saying even then, that completely takes off all your confidence with the fact that the infrastructure is not there. So it's not so much that how do we ape a city that's already done well. I feel no city has sort of cracked the code. We are all getting there incrementally in some form or the other, but there are cities who are just looking at it from a human lens, and I think that's what we all have to start with. We have to start building cities with good public spaces that are built for humans, not for gardens and lawns, and not for beautification. It's for people and people's usage, people where you need shade, where you need lighting, where you have seating. You need to encourage not just the woman to come and use the public space, but the woman to come with her boyfriend to use the public space, with her family to use the public space, with her children to use the public space, so, and even alone to use the public space. Like, my favorite place, I think, is a tiny bench that I keep seeing outside my kitchen window, and there are a bunch of women who sit there every day, and it's a private colony, and it's so good to see these women who sit there, but you don't see that across Chennai anywhere, because it's a public road and you see only men, if at all there is, auto drivers to be sitting at corner areas. There's no place where women can sit down and just like chill as women. Like, that doesn't exist. And I'm saying we start there before we even go further for examples. And, that's what I would like to say.
Yeah. I think it's just occupying space in the city, just being able to take up public space in the city is in itself like the first step in the challenge for all of us. So perhaps both Vaishnavi and Steffi can talk about what the Gender Labs work so far has brought out. If you can share some insights about Chennai that you've sort of gauged from the work of the Gender Lab, and how these are being addressed, or are they being heard, and how receptive has the stakeholder departments been? Has there been any positive signs that you've noticed for public spaces in the city?
We, in fact, have been in a really good position to pull in different government departments. And 1 year into the program, we can very happily say that we are truly proud of this achievement, because everyone talks about government departments working in silos, they're not knowing what's happening with respect to each other's projects, activities, which is true. And then that is the reason why we were in fact brought into the picture, to sort of tie up all these departments and ensure all of these departments think about gender inclusivity every time they come up with a new initiative or project. So one of the things that we recently did was launch this fellowship called the Citizens for Safe Mobility Fellowship, We had done a safety audit in cemetery last year in the month of September, and we worked with community organizations. We also pulled in different government departments like the TN Habitat Board. We got the Tamil Nadu Police involved. We had GCC representatives, and that 2-day training / safety audit program did wonders. We were able to, I mean, it was just a very beautiful experience, bringing people from very different walks of life together to look at a certain place and sort of assess the different safety parameters in this from a marginalized user's point of view, say a woman with a child, a vendor, a flower vendor, a woman with disability, and that brought out a lot of key findings. And that's when we realized it would be truly useful for us to, in fact, like launch a model where we can engage with the citizens of Chennai and have them do a citywide audit. So the program, in fact, ended just last Friday on the 24th of March. We selected 22 fellows, 22 citizens from, again, very different educational and social backgrounds. We also had a transgender representative who was part of this fellowship. It was a 10-day program where the individuals were trained for 2 days. And there were 3 things that we had in place for this. We had a safety checklist, infrastructure checklist of different transit points and public spaces in the city. We had the safety pin tool, which is a mobile-based app, and they look at 9 specific parameters with respect to safety. And then we had a template where the fellows had to, an interview template where the fellows had to interview users of all these different public spaces and transit points. So what are the points that we looked at? We looked at MRTS stations, suburban railway stations. We looked at MTC bus depots, approach roads to many of these transit points. We looked at a park, a play field, so these were primarily the different infrastructure that we looked at, and we were looking at 5 different clusters across Chennai. We divided these fellows into 7 groups and had them do like a very detailed 5 to 6 day safety audit across these clusters. And then we had them present their findings to different government departments. And a lot of important issues were raised during that presentation. And we are not just talking infrastructure, we are also talking about the soft components too. Say certain areas are occupied by antisocial elements. There is evidence that there are certain illegal or strange activities happening in certain places. So there were 2 things that we looked at. We looked at the infrastructure bit of it, but we also looked at the soft component bit of it. Unfortunately, we are not in a place to tell you exactly what those findings are, but the goal is to share these findings with all the government departments that were part of the final day presentation and have them rectified and work towards it. We definitely received very positive
response from the government, different departments. Yeah.
Yes, we received very positive response from all these individuals who were present. And this was a very interesting experience for us.
To add to what Steffi was saying, are we being heard? I mean, like Gender Lab's existence, like sometimes I get like very surprised. We don't have to keep justifying our existence within like different departments, because most of the time these days, I feel people are sensitized to the issues, at least people in the top level, like they're sensitized. Okay, there is a recognition that women needs are a little bit different. Okay, let's give some space. So I mean, like I have been here only for a year. So I find it sometimes surprising. Okay, so we don't have to justify why we need to speak about gender. Oh, why we don't have to speak about women's needs. I think that bit of sensitization has come in most of the departments. And especially like in the higher level, you're no longer questioned about, is it even necessary? We have not been questioned that way, at least. And also, like, even when you're talking about some issues like dark spots within GCC and all of that, there is a very clear understanding and recognition. Okay, dark spots affects everybody, but it does affect women and other marginalized groups more. That level of understanding exists even within, even in the lowest level of people who are like providing services within the system. But again, I'm speaking mainly from the GCC aspect. It might be different when it comes to police and like MTC and all of that. But always the intent is there, right? Like, but how do you shape that intent? As someone was saying, that nobody is going to say that, like, let everybody wants Chennai to be a safer place for women. But how do you channelize and streamline that intent into actions by creating provisions that that all of us can work towards to? That's something that needs to be looked at, and with such complicated institutions and systems, that's where we are at. I feel like the issue is now, like, everybody's understood. There is some bit of like funding and importance is given to that, and the intent is right, and I think we are going like slowly towards in that direction. Like the pathway is what I think we are figuring out.
So incremental change is something that we can be sort of expecting for Chennai. So I want to bring in Jyotilakshmi ma'am first to talk about your wish list, and also to talk about add to how you think the systems at present that exist can be strengthened to inspire that confidence in women to come and speak up about issues that they face in the public sphere. What are some things that can be done there as well to sort of create a system that will empower women?
Yeah, Aruna, my wish list would be like, let's first of all agree on page 1 that to live with dignity, with safety and security are a basic fundamental rights. If it is not happening, somebody is not working properly. So we need to fix accountability to every missionary of the state. And of course, we have our own share of responsibility as citizens too. And my wish list would be like to have more police, more sensitized police. I can say about having more judges with adequate staff to support the judiciary, and to have more protection officers. There are protection officers who complain that they have to take their two-wheeler and to make the home visit, and as well they have to go to the court visit to make. Which is not at all possible. So we are so understaffed. So these are the key areas that we need to improve. And the women's safety in public space came under great discussion during the Swati murder case, in 2016. The more weightage has been given on, like as many of the panelists have said, like to have more eyes on the street, to install CCTV camera, and that has to be monitored. All those things came as a suggestion. And as on today, Chennai is we have more CCTV camera coverage in the world. Globally, Chennai is the city which has more CCTV cameras. Still, the crime against women is on the rise. So it is not proving to be a beneficial suggestion. So we are also on the discussion of having a criminal database and a more sophisticated app to track the criminals. Those kind of technological change. But what we see in practice is when a woman comes to the police station for women harassment cases, rather the victim, the perpetrator or the accused is so much protected by the whole system. That's what we say. No law can be greater than the cultural development of a society. So we need to evolve better. So we need to have more awareness and sensitized thing, and how we define the family. We don't define the family out of love. We don't respect women, right? So I think that is the area we need to address. In Cuba, they have a family code. They have defined a family that arises out of love. So we need to make lot many changes. We need to change the status quo at all, like how we define our families, how we define the relationships has to be changed. And more women has to be in the representative capacity, even at the policy making space. So we talk about policies. We don't find women's interest in the policies, right? We have these policies. coming from the outside agencies. Like we would be signatories of some international conventions. So to get the funding, we need to enact the domestic laws. So these are the kind of interventions why we have the laws in place in our country at all. That has to be reversed. It has to come from the people, and we should be able to represent better in the policy making stage itself.
That's an important point that you've raised, ma'am, in terms of women's voices being centered when these decisions are being made. So I think before we close, I would like to just ask all of you about the societal aspects of this issue as well. To each of you, what do you think socially can be done? So we've discussed quite a bit about the built environment and what are some planning aspects that we can do? What are some checks and balances, redressal mechanisms? But all of that, like Pavitra had pointed out, the societal attitudes towards women plays a huge role. So what do you think should change for that to sort of happen as well, for women to be able to claim their space in public and just like exist as people?
I mean, this is something that we have spoken a lot about at Gender Lab. In fact, like Vaishnavi and I have had long discussions about this. I do not know like what is that, one shoe fit all solution, but like, how do we reinforce positive behavior in men? That is something that we have actively spoken about because, see, there may be a lot of eyes on the street, okay, but if it's not diverse, you're still going to feel really strange and weird. Like I go to this park regularly, it's filled with a lot of individuals, but at the end of the day, when I see men staring at me, checking me out from top to bottom, you may have so many people around, but you're still going to feel so awkward and unsafe. This may be happening in broad daylight. So what do you do to instill this positive behavior in men to sort of put across this message that staring is not okay, leering is not okay, it's not okay to eat these, it's not okay to pass comments, it's not okay to stare so aggressively. What do you do even when you take a metro or when you take the train, when you take a share auto? I mean, this is something I've noticed a lot in Chennai. Like people, like men stare a lot. So what do you do to like put an end to this behavior, and this is one like small step, but what can you do? I honestly do not have the answer, and everyone will talk about behavioral change and starting from like starting classes. I mean, starting all this sort of behavioral change training sessions from childhood, instilling these values, as a family. But is that how? I mean, how do you go about it? It's very easy to put it that way, but would that really work? I'm not sure.
I mean, to just
Yes.
Yeah,
Pavitra, you go on.
No, I was just saying that yes, I think it's going to take a long time for, say for example, the next generation of men maybe, hopefully, that, stop staring at women. But, fundamentally, I think we all have to just start occupying this space and like, act with confidence, and we are enough number on the road that, such that they have enough to see, and therefore we are not caring about it either. And, it can only work that way at this point because we are unfortunately still one of the generations where we are being leered at, sort of looked at, and we can't I'm saying yes, I'm talking from a point of privilege, but still like having someone looked at you is bad, but the only way you can fight it is to not care about it, and easier said than done, but still you have to still get on with it and get more women on the road and keep walking and keep marching and like keep occupying the public spaces. And like in India they say that you wear little clothes, they look at you. That's not the logic, they look at you anyway. So just be however you want to be, and like just keep occupying public spaces and make yourself seen. Like the more we are on the face of it, we hope to be part of the planning, sort of. That's what's probably helped in building a gender lab, and building the fact that we need a core understanding of the fact that this exists, and that will be the fundamental aspect of it. And therefore we can probably hope that next generation, we wouldn't potentially need a gender lab. It would just be something that's inherently in the systems that we have built.
Yeah, I just had an input. So interestingly, I had a conversation with a college principal. She was about 65 plus, and she was narrating her college days experience that she had studied some college in Anna Nagar. And, they are subjected to so much of sexual harassment, like while leaving the college, men will come in cycles. It was all happening in 1970s. They would come in cycles exhibiting their genitals. So this is a very common thing that the girls had to undergo every day while returning home in the isolated streets. And in 2023, I was addressing a college in Tambaram. And after the session, a girl came to me and said the same issue, that kind of sexual abuse or the exhibition is she has been undergoing because of someone in a neighborhood in 2023. So very similar kind of offense that has been happening from 70s to 2023. Nothing has changed. So we cannot expect the next generation to change. Unless forced, they will never change. So we have seen the punishment is not being acted as a deterrent to such kind of sexual abuses. And the reformations, it's nothing happening. So somehow we need to force the change. And we all know, like, these kind of offenders, or they have the mental sickness. We need to focus on the mental health. We need to focus on how we have designed our society at all. And so we need to change the status quo and force the change. So on its own, it will never happen.
Okay. To add to everyone, so yeah, as everybody's been talking, like, I mean, I never got to say my wish list. I really want to say that. So yeah, like, even I would want to, like, just like go on the street, like wear shorts and just not think about should I wear this or not, twice before stepping out. Like, that's something as simple as that I would like. But I also wish that women would be much more expressive on the streets and not like shrink ourselves to be accepted on the streets, to be visible, to be like, on the face. That's something that I would, I see like it's happening in like some parts of the city with, like, especially when you go to like a fish market and all that, you would see like, women like always being the boss of the streets. I would wish that to happen like for rest of everywhere. So something that, and for societal change to happen, I think media plays a huge role. Like, say, I'm from Kumbakonam. I learned a lot of things. Positive behavior, not from anything from Tamil media. Like, I am a big Tamil movie watcher. I learned nothing about treating women with respect from movies. And in fact, when we go back and have conversations about like how we have changed in the last 10 years, it's usually like, the media from outside which has changed to even like question, oh, it's wrong. Like, we didn't know that it was wrong. Oh, it was supposed to be this way. Like, even the way we treat each other was wrong. Either you learn it from books or movies or someone tells you. None of this happens here in our society that, where you're told when a woman is treated badly. So we learned it from media, and usually I've learned it from outside, English-based media from outside. So probably like I would wish at least the Tamil media and especially the serials to begin with to stop. Start with basics about treating women properly. Maybe like that's one way of looking at societal change for me. Instead of, I get all of these things about it's going to take time and all of that, but I think media is one aspect, very crucial aspect, since we are like such a pop culture obsessed society. I would think media plays a huge role.
I'd like to just add 2 points. I know it's sort of towards the end of our time. These are personal anecdotes, and maybe, I do look at it on a society level as well. So it was by the Gender Lab only that I had attended this workshop called How We Raise Our Voice. And I'd also asked a male member of my family to attend it. And it was a 3-day workshop, and activist Charlene Maria Lawrence, she had taken us through 3 days of, you know, really looking at the toxic masculinity narratives. What do we mean, or how do we look at our boys when we go to schools and we teach them? Like as a teacher, what is my bias when I'm teaching a boy? What is my bias as a woman teacher? So I mean, the workshop was supposed to be about uh, the students, but it was really like a reflection of our attitudes as adults. And I felt like that space was very helpful in really sort of addressing that these issues exist and how they exist, and having someone like Shalin Maria Lawrence sort of speak to us in a very accessible, very relatable manner was quite helpful. Like this, the male member of my family at the end of 3 days was asking questions that all of my Instagram, Facebook posts didn't make any difference to. So it's like when you're in a community-based discussion with other teachers, with other people who look like you, who talk like you, who are coming from similar social backgrounds, you tend to listen. You do tend to question, okay, hey, this is happening and it's not okay, and what can we do? So I feel like even how Pavitra had mentioned, when you see the example of seeing auto drivers in the corner of the street, if we were to engage with the section of people, and I feel like if they were also part of a workshop like this, if there were a listening circle which is being conducted, is what I understand by the Gender Lab as well. It's like there are these listening circles with men where you get to talk about these things. And like how Vaishnavi said, most of our movies do not talk about respecting women at all. And who makes up the fan clubs of the major actors in these films? Mostly men. So if we can access these spaces and have discussions with the very people that we feel unsafe with, I feel like there's a definite first step in terms of attitudes. And the second thing that I feel societal thing is that for me personally, there's a lot of shame. Like I have been groped and I have been flashed at several times. And each time there is just so much of shame, like, and it's always like, did I do something wrong? Was it my fault? There's always an inner question of, okay, I only did something wrong. It's my fault. Oh my God. And a paralysis almost. And I feel like learning to access your own body in public spaces, right? Because we tend to dissociate. The minute I'm in a bus, I will dissociate from my body, because if I were to be very aware of how much is being sticking on my back and to my sides, I would honestly freak out, or I would not like it. So I feel like having that communication with your own body, and not shaming it, and being like, okay, this was wrong, it was not my fault. Who can I go to? That education and that sort of shame resilience, so to speak, would be very helpful as women, because like Jyoti Lakshmi ma'am said, maybe people who flash are going to flash forever. Those things are not going to change. So, but our attitudes and how we respond to it, and the kind of communities that we can build slowly to say that this wasn't your fault. Because every time I have been through a situation, if I would tell someone, they'd be like, what did you do? What time was it? What were you wearing? It's always, what did I do? I'm standing in a bus. That's it. Like, is that wrong? Then it will be like, oh, it was so late. You could have just taken an auto and come home. Why come in a crowded bus? So the question is always, what did I do? I feel like if we can address that shame and address that stigma, again, through, I feel, small circles. I don't think like how Steffi had mentioned as well, like one shoe fits all. It's like you need to know which spaces need what kind of discussions and who can take them forward.
Yeah, I think those are some really important things that in terms of how we even deal with our desire to claim the space, and what kind of the myriad feelings that we sort of feel before we feel empowered enough to really step out and take charge. So I think we're at the hour mark, so I don't want to keep anyone longer, but thank you so much for joining. I think there's a lot to think about in terms of how we engage with the larger society, how we plan for the city going forward, but also how we take all these stakeholders along as well. So perhaps more questions than answers at this point of time, but hopefully through sort of the incremental processes that we've all been talking about and hoping for, we'll get there at some point of time. So thank you so much. We hope to keep this discussion going through a series of stories, and so we'll be in touch. And thank you. Thanks for engaging with us and taking time to join us today. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.